The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you all for joining today's virtual town hall on programmatic accreditation and exercise profession. Today's session will provide an overview of the exercise profession, the rationale of the ACSM board to make programmatic accreditation an educational requirement by 2027, and what institutions should expect in the future. The town hall is scheduled to be a 40-minute presentation and 20 minutes of questions and answers. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature on the webinar. We will answer your questions at the end of this presentation or as a follow-up blog. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel. And we'll go with Ben Thompson, and we'll kind of go down the list. Ben, you're muted.
Hi, my name is Ben Thompson. I'm the chair of the Committee on Accreditation for the Exercise Sciences, and I am also a program director of an accredited program.
Hi, my name is Walt Thompson. No relationship to Ben Thompson. I'm a Regents Professor Emeritus at Georgia State University, where I served as Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Research. I'm a member of the Committee on Accreditation for the Exercise Sciences and proudly served as the founding chair of the COES.
Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Ward-Rotaco. I am the current chair of the ACSM Committee on Certification and Registry Boards. I'm also an assistant professor at the University of Rhode Island and the program director for an accredited program.
Mayor.
Hi, my name is Mayor Magal. I'm the former chair of CCRB. I'm also professor of exercise science and chair of the School of Mathematics and Sciences at North Carolina Wesleyan College.
Michael.
Yeah, hello, my name is Michael Lynch, and I'm currently serving as the chair of the CEP Credentialing Committee for the ACSM. I was the former chair of the RCEP when we still had that designation, and I'm in private practice here in the Seattle area.
Trent.
Hi, everybody. My name is Trent Hargens. I am an associate professor at James Madison University in exercise science. I'm also the undergraduate curriculum coordinator for our undergraduate exercise science program. And I am currently serving as president of the Clinical Exercise Physiology Association, which is an ACSM affiliate society.
Great, and I'm Francis Nerick. I'm the National Director of Certification here at ACSM. I'll be today's moderator. And I will hand it off to Ben and Walt.
Okay, thank you, Francis. So before we get into kind of the details and the nitty-gritty of the accreditation, I just wanted to give a little bit of a background about CAHEP, so the Commission on Accreditation for Allied Health Education Programs. So accreditation of programs actually really started back in the 30s with the American Medical Association, and a couple of prominent organizations. One of them is the American Physical Therapist Associations asked the AMA to help them create a body that could accredit their programs. And so that's initially where everything started. And eventually the AMA was involved up to about 1994 when they stepped away. And the Committee on CAHEP was born. And so CAHEP had programs like athletic training, physician assistants, and they helped mentor those programs until they were kind of sufficient enough and self-sufficient enough to create their own specialized accrediting body. Committee on Accreditation of Exercise Science came in about 2009, where Dr. Walt Thompson was one of those founding members, and it was launched at a time that in academics might have not been the best time point because of economics, but nevertheless it was launched, and currently we have about 66 accredited programs, which is actually a lot because it's a voluntary accredited accreditation. We don't force people to become accredited. So that's kind of the background of CAHEP and the COES. I hope you can keep up with all the acronyms. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is we're a programmatic accreditation. So we're looking at specific programs, the exercise science, exercise physiology. We're not institutional accreditation, which Christy and May are going to talk a little bit more about. Okay? One of the important things to think about with programmatic accreditation is we really focus on outcomes. Okay? So we're an outcomes-based accrediting body. So we want to see a student goes through and matriculates through your curriculum. What are the outcomes? And we have specific outcomes that we actually want our programs to track, things like positive placement or employment, how they performed on a culminating experience like an internship or a certification exam, how satisfied are employers with the preparation of those students. They're just some of the outcomes that we ask programs to track. Our goal is to really help these budding programs really kind of get in place the machinery to start tracking these outcomes. And we provide the programs with certain competencies that they need to meet that we believe create a appropriately prepared exercise professional or exercise physiologist. And that's really kind of what the goal of our accrediting body is. When you go through the initial self-study process, we don't expect you to have data on outcomes. What we do expect you to have is a mechanism or a plan in place to start collecting those specific data. And what we do is annually, you submit a report to the COAS and we review to see how you're doing on collecting those specific outcomes data. We don't mandate how you collect those outcomes or the classes or the name of your degree or anything like that. All we are kind of really focused on is that you someplace in your curriculum meet these different competencies for the exercise science or exercise physiologist. And so we don't say, you have to have X number of faculty or you have to have X class to prepare your students, just as long as all those competencies are met, you're good, and that you follow and collect data on those specific outcomes. So it's definitely not a process-based accreditation where we tell you what to do. We say, here's what we know a prepared professional should have knowledge and skills-wise. Go ahead and teach them, and then we're going to give and look at outcomes. Okay? One of the things that also you have to think about is fees associated with accreditation. And COAS and KHEP accreditation is actually one of the more affordable accrediting bodies. So there's an annual fee that KHEP charges that's about $600. And then the COAS ourselves, we have an annual fee of $500. And that's really it. And because of what's going on kind of with the coronavirus, as well as how higher education is not always funded the best. Some of these we're actually in the process of thinking of maybe waiving initially to help really foster and get programs accredited. I think that's all I have about accreditation so far. And I think Christy and May are going to talk next.
Ben, before we get too far along, can I fill in just a couple of things on the history of the COAS, because I think it's important. When we launched the Committee on Accreditation for the Exercise Sciences, and I say we, the American College of Sports Medicine was the founding sponsoring organization, we sought out broad support, as much support as we could possibly get. So between 2000 and about 2007 and today, a little over a decade, we now have as sponsoring organizations, those organizations that pay a fee to become a sponsoring organization. Includes not only the American College of Sports Medicine, but also the American Council on Exercise, ACE, the American Kinesiotherapy Association, AKTA, the National Academy of Sports Medicine, NASM, the National Council on Strength and Fitness, and then most recently, the American Red Cross. So you can see that there's very broad support for academic accreditation from those who are hiring our graduates. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide on level setting. I'm going to hand this off to Christy and Mayor.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Ben and Walt. So Christy and I are going to look at that from the perspective of CCRB. Before I describe certification, accreditation, and registry, I want to briefly describe the rationale for the change from the perspective of ACSM Committee on Certification and Registry Board, or CCRB. Currently, the number of unaccredited exercise science and related program exceeds the number of those programs that achieve accreditation. This situation create a large discrepancy in content, curriculum, and program structure between departments. We strongly believe that widespread accreditation would not only ensure greater consistency between exercise science programs, but also provide safeguards for employers and the public served by ACSM certified exercise science professionals. So from the perspective of the board, this is extremely important. Specifically in terms of certifications, certifications are defined as profession-related responsibilities. The CCRB has a clear responsibility and therefore the importance of accreditation. So we are responsible, CCRB is responsible for certified professionals. The ACSM Certification Board has the responsibility to assure to the public that both the ACSM Certified Exercise Physiologist, or ACSM EP, and ACSM CP, the clinical exercise physiologist, are safe and effective exercise professionals. They also meet the minimum expectation of employers. In addition, they remain competent throughout their careers, defined by ACSM, and retain high level of ethical conduct through their professional careers as defined by ACSM Certification Code of Ethics. In terms of accreditation and relationship to CCRB, accreditation is different from certification and relates to how do we prepare our exercise professionals. So obviously that's important for CCRB. I do want to clarify that in academia, we usually discuss regional accreditation of an institution, and regional accreditation usually describes the privilege to award academic degrees, and this is not what KHAP and COAS are. Here, the discussion revolves around the programmatic accreditation. It is important to point out, and Ben and Walt talk a little bit about it, the overreaching objective of COAS and KHAP is to establish standards and guidelines for academic programs, which will guide the preparation of students seeking employment in health, fitness, and exercise industry. This is done by establishing and implementing a process of self-study, review, and recommendation, and Ben talked a little bit about it. Also, Ben mentioned that KHAP and COAS is an outcome-based accreditation. KHAP is interested in measurable outcomes and does not dictate processes through, for example, if we're looking at regional accreditation, at times we are asked to make changes. This is not the case with COAS accreditation. In terms of registration or registration help exercise professional post-college graduation and attainment of certification. Registry provide the public with data about unique group of individuals, in this case is exercise professionals. An example of such registry is the Clinical Exercise Physiology Registry and the U.S. Registry of Exercise Professionals, also known as US RAPS. These registries allow us to verify the certification of actively practicing exercise physiologists and identify the location of the practice. So that's going to help professional in the next step. Christy?
Thanks for setting us up, Mayor. Francis, can you just head to the next slide?
Sure.
So when we look at accreditation in the big picture, this is really one step in many steps at building exercise physiology, the future of our profession, and really aligning our professionals with the peer allied professionals that are currently practicing out there. So we're really using programmatic accreditation as one step in the process to build support for exercise professionals as essential members of healthcare teams. So our job as a certification board is to ensure that we are sending certified professionals out at a minimally competent level when entering the job market. So we want people getting out there with the knowledge, the skills, the content, and the abilities that allow them to do the job so that they're safe for the public, as well as competent and doing a great job for their employers. And so we believe that programmatic accreditation also helps us as a board to administer fair, valid, and reliable exams. That's one of the charges of the CCRB, is to make sure that our certification exams are fair, valid, and reliable. And the exams become more fair when all of the potential certificants, we know that they have been prepared with content that is similar among their knowledge, skills, and abilities. So we are really making sure that our certified professionals, A, have a great opportunity to do well on that exam, and B, we're also making sure that we're sending out similarly prepared and well-prepared professionals into the public space. And so again, programmatic accreditation is one step in this process of making sure that our professional certificates are ready and willing and able to get out into the job market. Once they're in a job, we provide them with high quality continuing education credits and opportunities to enhance their skill sets. And then by having certification, we also need to make sure that we have a location in which they can be identified. And so that's where professional registration and referral networks come into play. And Francis, do you have a little bit to add about professional registration and those referral networks?
Yeah, it's a great question. So ACSM is connected with the committee and the Coalition for the Registration of Exercise Professionals, which is the U.S. Registry. On the U.S. Registry, it's the exercise professionals of where they're practicing, positive verification of their certification. So it really ties into the pieces that Chrissy talked about: programmatic accreditation, how they prepare to get into the profession adequately. Certification is whether they meet those minimum knowledge, skills, and abilities of the job. Continuing competence is what's related to how do you remain competent over the lifetime of your career. And professional registration, or the U.S. Registry, is where you can find these individuals that are practicing today. That's kind of where those are really kind of cornerstone pieces of the exercise profession. And finally, on the referral network, it's really matching up the exercise professional to the need of either the patient or the client. Just making sure that when you're working with higher risk clients, that you're mapping them to the appropriately qualified exercise professional. So that's kind of like it's the big picture, and making sure that we have the right exercise professional providing the appropriate amount of exercise testing, prescription, et cetera, and to have a safe, reliable, and valid professional that's out there. And I will hand it off to Michael and Trent.
Go ahead, Trent.
Well, certainly from the CEPA, Clinical Exercise Physiology Association standpoint, what we have seen certainly is growth in the realm of practicing clinical exercise physiologists. As you can see, kind of the stat there in terms of how fast this is potentially growing. And from a practitioner standpoint, working kind of out in the clinic, interacting with people in a clinical rehabilitation type of setting, CEPA, feels that really this is an important step in advancing the profession of clinical exercise physiologists. there are some tangible, as you can see from the slide there, some differences that exist in content, curriculum, et cetera, that accreditation will allow some basic understanding that as people come through these programs, they are prepared and they're well prepared to service to a clinical population. So to be able to move this profession towards some other, in a way similar to other allied health professionals, like athletic trainers, like nursing, et cetera, having this accreditation step is really important in moving this profession forward. Certainly into the realm of things where being able to potentially bill for services, get reimbursement for these services, and know that these third parties, they know who, what they're reimbursing for, what qualities, what standards that these individuals who are coming from these programs, what qualifications do they have? So that's is a really important thing that we feel that this is a good step in moving the profession of the clinical exercise physiologist forward, bringing more people into this profession, being able to potentially bill and get reimbursed for their services, bringing more money into the healthcare system, which could also help long-term to potentially raise salaries for individuals who are practicing clinical exercise physiologists. This is just a really important step that we feel. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I've been serving in the role of committee chair for a number of years, participating with CCRB for about 6 years now in a chair or leadership role. So in looking at some of the history and some of the personal experience with that, in the beginning and reviewing the applications for people coming into the certification, one thing that we would see is quite a bit of variance in educational experience that the students would have. And as a credentialing committee, we would have to have standards that we would abide by. But we would see students coming in who had graduated with either an undergrad or graduate degree, but not have the education credentials to take the exam for our certification. And from a student perspective, one, I had to imagine that was disappointing. And from a credentialing committee, to see many different variances of education, reviewing a lot of different curriculums as we would see a lot of variability when you start to look at many different programs across the field. We felt at that point having a standardization process would not only help to serve the field, but the students as well, who are really coming into their educational experience, looking at that being a path to a career opportunity. So I feel both from the standpoint of the students, a certain amount of benefit to having a standardization process when they're looking to move forward in their professional careers. I can also speak briefly to a personal experience as I'm also a registered dietitian. And I went to become a registered dietitian shortly after I finished my master's degree in clinical exercise physiology. And I can just really speak to the two very different experiences that you would have as a student coming through a standardized curriculum and education process that you knew was more or less streamlined and supported to set you up for a certain examination that was going to move you along in your career. And so having had that personal experience and wanting on behalf of our students and the people coming to the profession for them to have that same kind of support to come in to, as they want to be an exercise physiologist or clinical exercise physiologist, that they have the educational requirements that's going to set them up for success moving forward. That is something that I felt on behalf of the students was very important. The other aspect of it, and again, just having the vantage point of being involved in a different career path as a registered dietitian, as well as a clinical exercise physiologist, is seeing the variance from the standpoint of a career aspect, both personally as well as what I feel is a different reception from other professionals, other clinicians who you may want to work with. And I feel like from a field standpoint, these are very important processes for us to follow for a certain amount of standardization from the standpoint of the clinical exercise physiologist having its place in the healthcare field. And so I think these are important steps for us to take as far as that standardization. So I look at this for as far as moving the field forward from the standpoint of the students coming into it, as well as from the field itself.
Yeah, and it is an important thing to note that, you know, certainly from a clinical exercise physiologist standpoint, you know, everybody on this webinar is well aware of how important a clinical exercise physiologist can be to a healthcare team. And if you look at other allied health professions, like athletic trainers, like nurses, like physical therapists, they are coming from accredited programs. And so to get us to kind of that level, I think this is an important move.
Absolutely.
And I'll hand it back to Christy.
So we hope today that we have maybe assuaged some of your fears about this transition. We are certainly thankful to have so much interest from a number of university programs and outside collaborators. At last update, Francis said we had over 137 different programs interested in hearing what we had to say today. So we hope that this information has been helpful to you. We're looking forward to answering your questions. And I just want to reiterate that we made this decision as a credentialing board or certification board after a number of years of discussions with many stakeholders. So these discussions have occurred with ACSM staff, with elected leadership, with the CCRB executive team, as well as the individual subcommittees for the exercise physiologist certification, as well as the clinical exercise physiologist certification. So this decision did not happen in a short period of time. It was a lot of years of deliberate discussion and movement towards this ultimate decision. And so we're really excited about it. We think this is a wonderful step for the profession, and we're very excited that people seem to be interested and on board with this coming change. Now, with that in mind, we also understand that there are a number of competing demands on departments, faculty, on their administrators, on the universities themselves, for your time, your energy, and your resources. So that's also why this announcement comes now with the implementation of this requirement in 2027. So we're hoping that this announcement gives you time to contemplate how best to make these changes to ensure that this outcome is what's best for your department, your students, and your university. We know and feel that this is the best decision that we can make for ACSM certified professionals and for the profession. And so we're looking forward to working with the folks at COAS and those at ACSM and with those of you in your departments to make sure that this transition happens as easily as possible, that you have all the information and all of the resources that you need. And we want you to know that we've deliberately done this in a way to make sure that you have the time to find the best way to implement this, and we hope to provide you with all the resources that you need to make this change happen. So with that, I want to open it for questions. I also just want to mention that Francis has made handouts from today's presentation available to you within the control panel of the GoToWebinar, kind of that side panel that you see. So if you click on handouts, there are 4 handouts there for you. One will be the slides from today's presentation. So if you need to share those with your faculty, please do so. There is an infographic from COAS kind of outlining the accreditation process. We've also made available to you the ACSM exam content outlines for the exercise physiologist and the certified exercise physiologist. Those are obviously also available on the ACSM website, you can get that additional information from COAS from their website as well. And those websites will be featured on the next slide of the presentation. So with that, I really just want to thank our panelists for talking us through this process. We want to thank Francis and the staff at ACSM for all that they do. They are overworked and under appreciated, if you ask me. So thank you, Francis and Lisa and Tracy and Keela and everyone else at ACSM that works hard to make our certifications as fantastic and as well regarded as they are in the US and throughout the world. So with that, I believe we've got some questions in the chat. We'll take your questions otherwise. And again, thank you very much. And please contact us if you have questions or need resources.
Great. So I am tracking a couple questions. There's a couple of them that I'm going to direct to some of those on the panel, if you're okay with that. To Mayor, knowing your program at North Carolina Wesleyan College recently became KHEP accredited, could you provide an idea of the complexity and length of the process and any challenges that you faced?
Yeah, thanks, Francis. So we went through our accreditation process back in 2017, which is fairly recent. The process from start to end took about a year, and I would say that we probably took our time going through the process. The first step is to request information from COAS, and they provide you with all the information, and then you start collecting all the information for the self-study. That took us the bulk or the majority of the time, a few months. I think we started the process at the beginning of the year, and then throughout the semester, we were collecting information. So you need to collect information from the instructors, what information they cover in classes and so forth and so on, collect CVs, and so forth and so on. So that took us a few months to do because it was a bit slower on our end. After you do that, you submit the self-study to the COAS office, and the next step is to the COAS office will coordinate on-campus visit. Because we were hitting right at the beginning of the summer after we submitted everything, we had another delay because we don't hold any classes over the summer, and some of us were off campus. So we had to schedule our visit for September, I think. We had the on-campus visit, which was great, going through the self-study. The two visitors ask questions, provide us with pointers, things that we need to adjust, if any. We had to make some adjustments. So as soon as the visit was over, I think a day or two later, they actually sent us a report, a written report of some of the things and some of the recommendations they have. It took us a few weeks to respond. We sent it in, and a few weeks later, we received an email that we were approved by the COAS board. And then the next step, the decision is going to the KHEP board, and it took a few more weeks, maybe a month or so, and KHEP voted on it. And since then, we are accredited, and that was the beginning of 2018. So we still have 2 more years to go in our initial accreditation.
Great. So
And hold on, Francis. One more thing I do want to point out. I forgot to mention. I'm sorry. It is critical, in my opinion, and others may join in and add more comments. It is critical to appoint someone who is the point person, person that will collect all the information, put everything together. It makes the task much easier. That's one thing. The other thing is try to put, and it took us a few weeks as well, try to create the advisory committee as soon as possible, which is part of the process.
awesome. We have a lot of great questions that are in the chat. I'm going to probably make it a little more efficient to direct to certain people. First question is from Connie Tompkins. So I'm going to break her question up into 2 parts. Question part 1, I'll provide this to Walt. Can you please clarify the difference between COAES and KHEP?
Yeah, great question, Connie. Thanks for that. The KHEP, the Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Education Programs, is the accreditor. There are literally thousands of academic programs that seek accreditation each year through CAHEP. So they organizationally define committees that will help them make the strategic decision about accreditation. So in our case, it's the Committee on Accreditation for the Exercise Sciences. COES is not the accreditor, CAHEP is the accreditor. The Committee on Accreditation for the Exercise Sciences, the COAES, simply does the work for the Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Education Programs, makes the recommendation for accreditation, and then it's CAHEP that actually does the accreditation. Thanks, Connie. Great question.
Second part of the question to Ben. Will a certain percent of faculty teaching in an exercise science program need to hold a certified exercise physiologist certification?
That's a good question. I think for the program director, we don't require any type of certification. It's more education. They have to have at least a master's degree in exercise science or a related field. We don't require that they have an ACSM certification or any other certification. It's more education based.
Okay. This question I'm going to provide to the group. So I'll let anybody answer this one. This is from Deb Reeby. First, congratulations. This is a great step forward. If there are any trying to brand exercise physiologists and clinical exercise physiologists as the name for the degree professionals in our field, I wonder if the COES track should also be exercise physiology instead of exercise science and clinical exercise physiologist. I think our titles may confuse people. And I'll give that to Ben and Ward.
Yeah, I can provide some historical reference for that. When we initially approached CAHEP to develop the Committee on Accreditation for the Exercise Sciences, we were looking at undergraduate programs and graduate programs simultaneously. At the time, and I think it's still true today, CAHEP will not allow us to have to prepare exercise scientists at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level, and they had to be distinctly different. So we chose exercise science for the undergraduate program, basically because at that time our definition was much broader than applied exercise physiologist or a clinical exercise physiologist. So we developed the standards and guidelines for undergraduate programs in exercise science and the standards and guidelines for exercise physiology for the graduate level.
Ben, did you want to discuss the strength conditioning track as well?
Sure. So one of the things that is in the process of being approved by CAHEP is we have created an add-on to the exercise science accreditation, and it's a strength and conditioning add-on. And that's something that programs can also look at when they're thinking about becoming accredited. You could become have the exercise science accreditation and then also have the add-on of the strength and conditioning, depending on what the focus of your program is.
And this question goes back to Ben and Walt. This is from Richard Story. Can someone indicate how many exercise science programs exist nationally?
Yep. Thanks, Richard. I was actually looking at that and I was trying to think how many it was. I believe, and Walt can correct me, a few years ago we had looked nationally, and I think there were 400 to 500 exercise science programs nationally. I think.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to track because of different program names. Some are kinesiology, some are exercise science, some are health promotion. So it's really hard to track how many programs there are in how many institutions. But it's a good segue to tell the audience that neither the COES or CAHEP will require you to change the name of your department. So if your department is, for example, the Department of Kinesiology, it will not tell you that you have to change it to the Department of Exercise Science, nor will it mandate that you have a program in exercise science. As long as it looks like exercise science, has all the components that are necessary, and you have created an outcomes-based approach, that's all you need. So I guess the take-home message there is, don't worry about the name of your department. No one's going to ask you to change it to become an accredited program.
I'll provide this question to Mayor, and then potentially to Ben and Walt as well. For planning, this is messages from Cheryl. For planning purposes, how long do you think it will take a program to get through the accreditation process? That is, once a program is ready to go through the self-study process, how long does it take from self-study to accreditation?
So the question is, after the self-study is being already sent to the COAS office?
Yes, how long is the process?
The turnaround time is fairly quick from that point forward. Could probably potentially be 1 to 2 months, maybe 3 months at the most. Ben, do you agree with that assessment?
Yep, that sounds right. A lot of it depends just on the volume that we have, but we do really endeavor to get things done quickly because you guys put the effort into it. So I would say a month or two, yeah.
Next question is from David Cornell. Can we expect any changes to the standards and guidelines that are currently posted to the KHEP webpage, or are these standards and guidelines we should start preparing for? That's Walt and Ben.
That is a very good question. So the standard and guidelines that are currently on the KHEP website and the COAS website are, I think, from 2017. And we have recently gone through and revised those and included the strength and conditioning add-on. And right now, those guidelines are with KHEP and being reviewed. And we anticipate that they will be approved soon. So you would have the most up-to-date guidelines to use.
Let's see. This question's from Teresa. I'll give this one to Walt. My university is brick and mortar, but my program is completely online. Given technological advances, will online programs be eligible for accreditation?
Short answer is yes. A few years ago, we kind of hesitated on accrediting online programs because the basic question was, how do you assess a blood pressure without putting a cuff on somebody's arms? But as you know, there are now virtual ways of doing that, teaching that, and assessing that. We accredited our first online program now about 5 or 6 years ago. So we have some experience in the online delivery, both education and assessments. It's important, however, to remember that on these online programs and every program, we must develop, or you must develop, these outcomes, because this is an outcomes-based accreditation. And we are very flexible in the development of those outcomes. We want to make sure that they're outcomes that are directly related to the success of your students.
I'm going to ask this question to Christy and Mayor, so I'll have Christy go first. This one's from Christy Greenleaf. Can you clarify the accreditation for exercise science, the undergrad versus exercise physiology grad in relation to the new requirements for ACSM? So this is talking about educational requirements and how they tie to the various certifications. So the master's degree versus undergrad. I'll give that to you, Christy.
So I think the educational requirements and the degree requirements for the EP will still remain the minimum of a bachelor's degree in exercise science, and the clinical exercise physiologist, it's a bachelor's with, remind me of how many hours one must do?
1,200 hours.
1,200 hours, or a master's degree with
600 hours.
600 hours. So those, if you're asking if those particular benchmarks are changing, there's no plan for those particular benchmarks to change currently. Does that answer that question? I apologize if it does not.
To dovetail off your comment, Christy, I think every 5 to 7 years, the ACSM certification board has its credentialing committees review not only what's on the exam through a job task analysis, but they also look at the educational requirements and other related requirements. So right now, the current requirement for the undergrad in exercise science or exercise physiology for the certified exercise physiologist is there for the clinical program. It's a bachelor's of 1,200 hours of experience or a master's in exercise physiology with 600 hours of experience. That's not to say in 5 years from now or a few years from now that may just be only masters. Right now, as Christy mentioned earlier, it's about setting a fair, reliable, and valid exam, and part of that is the primary part of that is fairness. If it's unfair for, I say, an undergrad individual to take that exam and knowing that they're going to fail, then you raise the bar on the entry requirements. We also do an employer scan as well. If employers are requiring folks who are in the clinical exercise profession to have at least a master's degree, for example, then that's where that benchmarks get set. But we just set that in 2018. So probably 2023 when it gets reconsidered. The next question is I'll ask this to Ben, and then William was able to join us today as well. I guess I'll ask this question to William, if you're okay with that. What types of resources are available? Are there accreditation consultants or folks that we can meet in person to gauge our progress along the way? William, I can't hear you. And then while I get that set up, I'll hand that off to Ben.
Well,
okay, I'm actually on mute. Sorry. Hello, everyone. So resources we have, about a year ago, we had started an accreditation mentor program where volunteers from programs that have gone through the accreditation process with COAES are assigned as a mentor to a site that is curious about how to handle the self-study application, how to have conversations with administration. It's a volunteered service, and then so if someone was interested, they'd simply just reach out to COAES and say that they would prefer to have a mentor, just to have a conversation, and I think that makes them a lot more comfortable. As well as on the COAES website, under the resources section, there is an illustration that will walk you through the accreditation process, as well as answer a lot of other things too.
So this question I'll put to the COAES group. There's two questions on this one. This one's from Jennifer, and I'm going to follow up with another one. We are a large program that was accredited. We had to voluntarily give it up because we did not have enough faculty resources, time to compile data each year with close to 200 graduates, in addition to the master's and PhD degrees. What changes are being made to help larger programs?
Having been on the faculty of a very large undergraduate program of over 1,000 students, I can tell you that it can be a very streamlined process as long as you're willing to reach out to your alumni affairs office, field placement offices, and places like that. Trying to do this all by yourself with 1,000 students and 200 graduates a year can be cumbersome at best. But what we found with our over 1,000 undergraduates is that we were able to set up a process and standardize the process and ask for help across campus. You know, especially when it comes to something like positive placement. You know, where are the students going? Are they going to graduate school? Are they going to seek employment someplace? Are they going into the military? Whatever it happens to be. The alumni affairs offices across campuses, especially large campuses, are acutely aware of those kinds of things. So that's just one way of tracking outcomes, and just one suggestion of an outcome. A second outcome that you can choose that is very easy, especially if you're associated with the American College of Sports Medicine. You could work with Francis and his team in the certification department and actually track the students as they take the national certification examination. Because of certain restrictions, they can't tell you that Walt Thompson took the CEP exam and passed it, but they can certainly say and track, you had 200 students take the exam this year, 190 of them passed. So, you know, that's another outcome that you don't have to track. It's tracked by the ACSM certification department, Francis and his team. But it's simply identifying your institution, and Francis has a mechanism to do that. The student, when he or she takes the exam, identifies their institution by a tracking number or a voucher number, and then it's just one click away. So it's really not that cumbersome if you select the right outcomes.
Yep, I agree. And I think a lot of it is the institution is probably tracking a lot of those outcomes already. And it's just a matter of hooking up with whatever, your institutional research or whatever it's called, or your alumni association is a really good one to get in contact with. Yeah, I agree with you all.
This is Mayor. I also want to add that I think that if you organize, especially for smaller institutions, and we are far from 1,000 students graduating class every year, far smaller than that. But what we do is we contact our students before graduation. We ask them for a lot of information, such as email, what they're going to do, what are their plans, and so forth and so on. And we created a database from one year to the next so we can follow them. So the year after, for example, if I want to know what they're doing, and keep in mind that not all of them reply to my emails, as you guys can imagine, a year after they graduate. But at the very least, I do get some information from some graduates of what they do. Did they get certified over this past year, where they're working, or they're in graduate school, and so forth and so on. So there is a way to do it, I think, in smaller institutions as well, and medium-sized institutions.
Next question is to, I'll let Walt, Ben, or William figure out who wants to answer this one. This one's from Katie Taylor. Thank you for this presentation. It's been very insightful. I'd like to say, personally, I'm very excited about the promise of moving our field forward in this manner. However, as a faculty member at EWU, I have a number of questions that I'd like to be addressed. So, number one is, this sounds like it could make a difficult decision for programs as NSC are rolling out something similar, but with a different accrediting body. Many programs will likely have to make a decision between certifications, which is not student-centered. Are there any plans to join forces with NSCA rather than programs and institutions, particularly with small institutions, from having to choose one? I'll provide that to Ben and Walt.
Is the question, Francis, thanks for the question, Katie. I'm a little confused on it, though. Are you asking about choosing between accrediting organizations or certification?
I think it's more of the accreditation, because the CSCS, the NSCA made a requirement to sit for the CSCS by 2030 to come from an NSCA-defined accrediting institution, while the COAES and KHAP is aligned with the exercise physiology and clinical. So, as faculty, you have to figure out which one to do, and it might be a difficult decision.
Yeah, Katie, that actually is a great question. You have to look at the strength of your, pardon the pun, the strength of your program. If you have a singular focus on strength and conditioning, then I would go with the NSCA accreditation. If your focus is on exercise science and exercise physiology and preparing students to go into the practice of, for example, clinical exercise physiology, then another accreditation is not going to be very helpful for you. So you have to look at the strength of your faculty, strength of your students, and where your students are being employed, or if they're going on to graduate school in an exercise physiology program, then you'll want to get the KHAP accreditation. So it's a totally impossible question to answer from a bias that we all have. But I think I would suggest, Katie, that you become very, very careful about which of the accrediting organizations are going to be most beneficial for most of the students in your program.
So I think the underlying question on here too is does COAES or KHAP have any plans to work with the NSCA?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, part of the creation of our strengthening conditioning add-on track was working with other strengthening conditioning organizations. And it's kind of similar, where we're looking to see, these are the competencies that a strength and conditioning coach or whatever should have. So I think, you have to also think about, it's not just one certification that students or professionals can go out and get. It's not just ACSM that has a certification, it's other organizations that have these certifications. We've spoken with NSCA before, and I think at the time when they were thinking about doing their accreditation, and we were an accrediting body, I think at the time there were just some different opinions, and we hadn't joined, but that doesn't necessarily preclude that we will never ever speak to them and they're the evil other accrediting body. That's not how the COES is.
We have about
in fact, the National Council on Strength and Fitness is part of the COES, has been a sponsoring organization for quite some time. The NSCA was one of the original sponsors of the COES, and for whatever reason that they will have to explain, they decided not to continue with the COES. The NSCA and any other potential sponsoring organization they're always welcome to be a sponsoring organization of the COES. So NSCA or any other organization wants to join or rejoin the COES, they're always going to be welcome.
So we have about 4 minutes left, and I want to be sure that we are cognizant of everyone's time. There's a couple more questions that are still coming in. How frequently do the standards change? That's from BC, Charles Linscomb.
I think we review them every 3 years. Is that right, William? So I think the standards that we publish, we do review.
Yeah, so we definitely have a process of review at a minimum annually. We do meet in person annually. We did not this year. It was a series of 4 virtual sessions. However, when we propose our standards to KHEP, it is a rather lengthy process. And that's why, like Ben mentioned, every 3 years we will propose potentially new standards. But what that process looks like, we do have all of our sponsoring organizations post the draft for public comment. KHEP also does the same for public comment before any of those standards are approved. So hopefully that alleviates any concern that standards would be changed without notice.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, William. That's great. It's not only a lengthy process to get standards and guidelines approved by KHEP, but I can tell you it's a very painful process to change standards and guidelines. And by what I mean by that is KHEP has very strict standards on how they write and adopt and change standards and guidelines. So we're reluctant to make any significant changes. So if you're thinking about being accredited, say in 2 years' time or 3 years' time from today, I would almost bet my next paycheck, if I had one, that they're not going to change.
So I'm going to have one final question and then a wrap up with the panelists. Be sure that if you're attending and you didn't have your question answered, there's a ton of great questions in here. We'll be sure to answer those through a follow-up blog after this call. But the final question, I'll give this to William. So what is the initial initial accreditation costs and ongoing costs? This is from Janet to be accredited.
So traditionally, the cost of initial accreditation is a $750 fee, which is due before the time of the on-site visit. Traditionally, when in a non-COVID time, the cost of an on-site visit could be anywhere from, $500 to $2,000. I know Walt Thompson went over to the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Has been to Shanghai University of Sports. So it all depends on geography and travel requirements. However, we do have well over 50 site visitors that we could probably place in close proximity. Beyond that initial accreditation fee and the site visit cost, there's a $500 annual fee that is due every July 1st, and that is to the COAs. That is actually separate from the $600 KHEP annual institutional fee. And the thing that is important to note about that is that if University of North Carolina has one exercise science program that's accredited by KHEP, then they have to pay that $600 fee. And also if they have a nursing program, a PT program, an AT program, they still only pay one fee. So if your institution has more than one KHEP program, it's likely that your department wouldn't be liable for that fee. And then beyond that, we do a process of continuing review, which occurs, we call it a continuing accreditation review, that occurs at the 5-year mark, and then which is a $250 fee. So, but there's a site visit cost. So that's to mitigate that. And then dependent on the outcome of that continuing visit, that same fee would be at the following 5 years or the following 10. And I don't know, has it been discussed, our plans virtually, Francis?
No, so I was just gonna really quick add that, William, that's good. So currently we're gonna be performing virtual site visits. So obviously that negates the cost of travel and things like that. So that's information that will be posted soon on the COAS website as well.
Thank you, everyone, for our panelists for joining and presenting. We're about 1 minute over. I will have the recording sent out to everybody who's registered for our town hall, and be sure that we're going to answer all the questions that came in through the chat as well. Thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to the next steps with you all. Thank you and take care.